Welcome to my Unit 4 APUSH presentation. Um, I do know that I spelled my name wrong, but I realized that like just 2 days ago, and I had already been working on the project for like forever at that point, and I just thought that that was really funny, so I'm keeping it. And this next slide. So we got 6 topics total, and the first one is going to be the Second Great Awakening, because the first one was in um, a while ago. So the difference with this one is it's more focused on self-betterment. So like people are actually able to do to save themselves, like salvation. They can save themselves because last time the first Great Awakening was like you're powerless and you know like the all-powerful God, like you just have to cross your fingers that he doesn't hate you, and if he does, you're screwed. If he doesn't, then good for you. But um, yeah, so partially enabled by the market revolution because they like did little. Uh, Honestly, preachers at that time were kind of like rock stars because they would do like little. They would do like be little celebrities. They would go and do tours and like multiple month-long meetings uh, at different places, and they would do these tours mostly along canals, highways, and railroads, which only existed because of the market revolution. And of course, the burned over district, which I think I have on the next slide. No, I don't. I have it soon. The burned over district is like right along the Erie Canal, and then the farther away you get from the Erie Canal, the like less revivalist it gets. So yeah, it started in the south and spread into the north. A lot of the reforms that happened later happened in the north, but yeah, it started in the south. And oh yeah, millennialism is basically the belief that um, Jesus is coming back because that was like somewhere in the Bible. He said he was going to come back and then do Judgment Day. So basically, millennialism, they're saying like he's going to come back real soon, like within your lifetime. So we gotta make sure you clean your act up before he comes home and before dad comes home with the milk. But that's the joke because he didn't come back and neither did my dad. So I'm just kidding. I have a great relationship with my father. Yeah, so Charles Grandison Finney, he's kind of the famous face of the Second Great Awakening. I just abbreviated it as SGA. So he held big long meetings, like month-long meetings in New York, and especially like upstate or uh, northern New York. No, not just upstate. And he's famous for major success in Oneida County because it was just like he just like went there and then they were like losing their minds, which was pretty typical. Yeah, in these things, a lot of it happened to be more often women would get converted um, because they were like more emotional. At least that was they were more susceptible to the emotional manipulation. What did I just do? Okay, which is basically what these preachers would be doing. And Rev stands for revenant, I think. Rev, I don't know. Rev stands for something. So yeah, he stressed the right of private judgment in spiritual matters and the possibility of universal salvation. That was a really big thing with the Second Great Awakening, is that like everybody can be saved. You just kind of have to get good. And then yeah, God will love you. Then we have Joseph Smith. So, who is this guy? He grew up in the burned over district, so he grew up listening to these revivalist preachers. But the problem is he really didn't know like who to believe because they were all saying slightly different things, and he was like, "Well, I don't know which of you are right." So he started his own thing, and it included like a final revelation to the Bible. He found like these golden plates or something while he was treasure hunting, and apparently they had like things carved on them that had this extra revelation to the Bible, and it was, I think, I think the revelation was about plural marriage because that's what he ended up doing. He did that. He had all the wives, and because why have one wife when you can have all the wives? So yeah, and this was part of the reason that like they got kicked out of Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois because like people were really kind of weirded out by them. They like printed their own money, which you're, and then they couldn't back it up with gold, which you're not supposed to do. So it was basically worthless, and that was a problem. Um, and yeah, but then Smith, I don't know why he was in prison, but he got killed in prison in 1844. So then they got a new leader. I think it was like his brother or something. Don't I forget I said that. I don't know who it was. Um, and then they relocated to Utah and just like settled there. Because they were kicked out of all these other places. Also, Missouri, like, literally declared war on the Mormons. Like, that's how much they were hated. Like, people really did not like them. So, yeah, and I think that's it about them. They were they were one of many utopias. What's a utopia, you ask? That's what we're getting to on the next slide. So, oh, well, first we have to talk about all the isms of this period, and they're not disabilities. Millennialism, which I think I already had this. So this is the belief that Jesus is returning to Earth. It's like really quick, like really soon, like within, uh, your life, so like 20 years or something. Perfectionism, the belief that an individual can make themselves better through their own effort. Again, kind of like individual power, like you have the power to make yourself better. Like, it's your responsibility, like personal responsibility is a big part of the Second Great Awakening. Then Romanticism is a literary, as in books, and philosophical, as in brain thought, movement that emphasized individual, human individuality, self-reflection, and the basic goodness of humankind. So, like, and also Romanticism. So it's from Roman culture, romantic, because yeah, but it's also all that other stuff. And then we have transcendentalism. I always get like unsure of how to say that. But yes, this is a subgenre of Romanticism that also valued nature, beauty, truth, and spirituality. And they really liked their nature, I think. That was a big part. Oh, here's the burned over district that I promised like 4 slides ago. I don't know how far away that was. Okay, 3 slides ago. I should move those around. But hello? Okay. This is the burned over district. So as you can see right here, this is the Erie Canal, and the black squiggle, and then all these little dots are all these different things. So yeah, Mormons were um, birthed from this. Disciples of Christ were birthed from this, which we already talked about Mormons. I don't know who these people are, but yeah. So Western New York, strongly influenced by the revivalist fervor of the Second Great Awakening, and yeah, so yeah, all those little things. And then I have more maps on this slide. So this is a big map of the United States in case anybody else forgot what the US looked like, because I certainly did, and I was like, well, I knew vaguely where New York was, but I was like, where's the Erie Canal? So anyways, here's where it is. It's that like squiggle there, so you can kind of see it zoomed out. New York's up here by this Lake Ontario, and it's just like a kind of squiggle that goes really close to the lake. But yeah, and then here's a different map with all the um, with some other church religious thingies and a bunch more dots. So we got dots over here, and then I didn't bring the key over, but this is what the key for those dots is, just so you can compare, because this one didn't have a squiggle on it, so I thought I might as well. Yeah, anyways. Okay, wow, that flew by, didn't it? We are now on to reform movements, the second part of this. And these little things at the bottom are just the targets the like uh from the APUSH course, what they want you to learn for this unit. So yeah. So this is about what people did to try and achieve perfectionism. And here are the utopias that I promised. So we already talked about one utopia that was the Mormonism, which was like kind of a utopia, but they couldn't really settle, which a lot of these didn't end up working because utopias are, fictional fantasy things for a reason. They're very hard to um, keep alive. So we have the Shakers. They believed in celibacy, separating women, men and women, but they also really liked to dance, but they would dance with the men and women on like the other side of the room, and they were really interested in like how to organize space, I guess. Like just the layout of their towns are very interesting, like because um I guess because so all of these were based on the belief that environment shapes people's behavior. So if you can perfect the environment, you can create perfect people. So these were the different ways that all of them tried to perfect their environments. So they had a big focus on how to organize their space well, and also just individual spirituality. So then we have Brook Farm. So this is for the transcendentalist writers. Now, if you'll recall, the transcendentalist is a subgenre of romanticism, and they like nature. So they are on a farm, they love their nature. That's perfect for them, except no, because they didn't want to do the farm stuff. You have to, like, clean up the horse poop and stuff. And they were like, ew, I'm here to type. I don't want to do that. So that fell apart pretty quickly, but it was meant to be a utopia for transcendentalists, for trans writers. And Oneida County, I always want to say Oneida for some reason, but you can't, I guess. So I put that little helper there for me. So this is they just not a lot of people really got Oneida. They wanted to make like marriage and relationships just kind of less bad for women. So in um in like traditional marriage, like the husband kind of owned his wife, so they were like, well, no, we'll just not do marriage, and then people can leave whenever they want, like complex relationships and sort of an open marriage, but it wasn't exactly open marriage because it was still like you were committed to whatever relationship you were in. You just didn't, officially get married. But yeah, so a lot of people really didn't get what was going on. They were a bit ahead of their times. But yeah, that was trying to do like social equality. So this was spiritual equality. This was this was just writers. And then that was, yeah. So these are people of the reform. These are people of the reform movements. So Horace Mann he launched an effort to provide for free public education so that children can be prepared to live together in harmony, reduce class tensions, and properly live in the republic that is America. So he wanted to build public schools, and that's a major reason that we actually do have a lot of public schools in America today is because of Mr. Mann here. And then we have Dorothy Dix. So she was a advocate for the quote more humane treatment of the insane. So basically, prisons were used to just kind of throw undesirable people into in this time period, and they still kind of are, but that's a different topic. She was trying to make that a little less so. So um, she advocated for building actual asylums so that people with the mental illnesses that were just getting thrown in prison, instead of just getting thrown in prison, they could get help. So there were like, I think something like uh, I don't know, but she had a couple asylums built due to her uh, pressures. But so this was with good intention, but it actually did end up being kind of bad because then the asylums just ended up also treating patients horribly. But she was this was just part of the reform movement. People were trying to make the world a better place, and you know, rainbows and cupcakes. Yeah. Organizations that were part of the Reform Society. We've got the American Temperance Society. So they just were like, there was okay, so this actually isn't unjustified. There was a really, really big drinking problem in the 1800s. Like, people were drinking like 5 gallons of water or of alcohol on average per year, which is like a lot. And now it hasn't been that high since. It was like really, really high, because people were like just doing work and then they would go and drink after work. Um, and that was a big problem because like then they would be operating machinery and be hungover. So yeah, these were for a pretty good reason, but they were, yeah, so they used moral suasion, which is like persuasion, but I was trying to look up where this word came from or why it's not persuasion, but I don't really know. So it's just moral suasion, and it's like convincing people to change their lifestyle or habit by appealing to their morals. So these two societies or groups of people did that in different ways, or used moral suasion to basically make people want to stop drinking. So these people just said, in general, booze is bad, like beer is hard liquor, that sucks. And then Washingtonians were more focused on like the social aspect of it. So they were like, oh, well, people are going out to pubs and drinking because it's, getting together with people. So we should just make other ways to get together. So they liked singing and just getting together with like people and being like, this, do this instead of drinking, and it'll be so much better. So yeah, that's what those two guys do. Oh my gosh, we have gone through another um whole section. I don't know what to call these, but yeah, more sections. So nationalism in culture and arts, and all these little things. You don't have to read them, but I just put them there to help me remember. So here are some people of that were national. Oh, here are some nationalists. I was sitting on my foot and fell asleep, so I had to move. Okay, so we have Sylvester Graham. He is related to the graham crackers, but he would not be happy with the graham crackers we have today because he was like really keep your body slash diet clean equals keep your soul clean. And sugar was very bad for your soul and body and diet, and according to him. So he would not be very happy that they added sugar to his recipe. But yeah, whatever. He grew up with a like relative that was pretty like alcoholic and just always drinking. So he grew up to be a um, pretty passionate temperance advocate because he, saw the effects of too much drinking and was like, oh, I don't like that. People shouldn't do that. So, yeah, also he became vegetarian in 1829 because soul clean. Yeah. Henry Thoreau protested the Mexican War by refusing to pay. I really could. Look, I'm gonna be real with you. I could not find anything about this dude in the textbook, in either of my textbooks, in or in the videos that I was watching online. So this is the only thing I found from the Foner textbook, and he just didn't pay his taxes because he didn't like the Mexican War, which is the thing we're gonna that's actually like the last section, the sixth section. We're gonna talk about the Mexican War. So he didn't pay his taxes. He went to jail, and then to defend him, like what he did, he wrote an essay on civil disobedience. That was basically like, hold on, let me get my notes. And one quote from it that I liked is, quote, under a government which imprisons any unjustly, the true place of a just man is also a prison, unquote. So, yeah, and this essay actually went on to inspire other, like, nonviolent resistant advocates when resisting unjust laws such as Martin Luther King Jr. And that last but not least, definitely he was probably least because no one was talking about him. I don't know why. Yeah, we have Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was a transcendentalist author, and he was like a big fan of the idea of creating a national literary culture. So at this point, like, or a little, well, before this point, um, America was just kind of like copying British culture for pretty much everything, and especially with their books. So he was saying like people should just use their natural instincts and like be led by their natural instincts and emancipate themselves from their British heritage or influence because um, they should be doing American stuff. So he, yeah, was a writer. Then we have the art movement. So these guys, they were a bunch of I think 16 to 30-year olds, something like that, like younger guys that lived somewhere, like just kind of all over. And it wasn't like an actual school. I don't know why they called it that. Apparently, some like art critic coined that term like a few hundred years later, not hundred, a few decades later, which like it was apparently like meant to be an insult. Yeah, I really don't know why they called it a school. It wasn't a school. It was just kind of like a group of young-ish people that painted pretty pictures because God bless America. They just liked how it looked, and they were like, "Wow, we should like this. This makes what they say." Uh, Students contributed to the development of a national culture by painting nature and landscapes to demonstrate the grandeur of nature. Oh, and yeah, and then this is uh, Thomas Cole, um, who he founded the movement. He was like, and then one of the paintings that he did. This is the Oxbow, a view from Mount Holyoke, Northampton, Massachusetts, after a thunderstorm. It looks like during a thunderstorm, but I will not fight him. That's fine. Anyways, next up, you're probably wondering what a random French guy thought about all this, and I'm here to answer your questions. You are so lucky because we have Alexis de Tocqueville. I have no idea how to pronounce his name, so we're going to go with that. So he visited America in 1835 just for a year because he was like interested in their, oh, what's it called, penal system. Basically, like Americans had a different idea of what to do in prison. They were more like reform focused and rehabilitative focused. So he was like just going there to be like, okay, what's up with this? Is it working? How are they doing it? Like, what does that mean? All sorts of. He was just there to study that. But he was like distracted because American democracy is so great and amazing and outstanding, and he was just like so in love and was that's basically all that he cared about. He went there to study prison, and then he was just like, "Wow, look at the America." Yeah, another section down bites the dust. Women's rights. Let's go. So yeah, okay. Susan B. Anthony was actually kind of weird. I did not learn this in elementary school. I learned about Susan B. Anthony because she was the girl that wrote the letters, I thought. But no, she was actually like kind of a little bit of a loser. And this was all I could find about her in the textbook, Foner's textbook. Maybe there was more in the other textbook, but I mean, this was all that he said about her. So I mean, I don't know. Yeah, you've probably already read the whole slide by now, so I don't know if I have to read it to you. But yeah, she didn't like the 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment, which were um, giving the right to all men to vote regardless of race. But she was mad because it didn't include women, and then she actually was like mad at all abolitionist allies, even though the feminist movement is literally rooted in abolitionism. So she's like, yeah. So, And then there were some sane people, Lucy Stone and Abby Kelly, and also the Grimke sisters, which we're gonna, I think, are a couple more slides down, who were normal people, and they were like, "Oh, this is good because it's, we're getting closer to universal suffrage, which is the goal in the end. So we are happy with that." But she was like, "Nope, I'm just mad." Okay, this was like more of this is also called the cult of true womanhood. Um, so basically, politics are for boys. Girls are only allowed to do girly things and should have those traits as their whole personality. Like they, um, and like manly activities like politics and all that uh, are actually like desexing women or robbing them of their femininity. Like if they're reading and talking about politics too much, they're becoming masculine, which is like a bad thing. Yeah, but from what I understand, it's more of like a concept than an actual organized group. But it was like people would write, like people wrote like little handbooks on how to be a good woman, and uh, yeah, but I don't think it was like actually a cult. It was just kind of a concept. But that's was yeah. And they also believe that men and women belong in different spheres of society, which I'm not sure why they called it spheres because they literally are just like areas, sections. I don't know why it has to be a sphere because it's not really. Um, it's kind of similar to like spheres of influence. Like it's how is it a sphere? It's not. It's just not. So yeah, that bothers me. Anyways, but yeah, when we're supposed to be in the workforce and anywhere but home, women were supposed to be anywhere but the workforce, staying at home. And yeah, at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, which that was the first women's rights convention that was organized by women. So there might have been one before, but it wasn't organized by women. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote the Declaration of Sentiments at this meeting, at this convention in Seneca Falls, like Massachusetts, I think. I want to say Massachusetts. In Seneca Falls, it was like a city somewhere. So it was kind of based on the Declaration of oh my God, Declaration of Sentiments, which is the girls what they wrote is based on the Declaration of Independence, which is what the founding fathers wrote in whenever that year was. So basically, the Declaration of Independence was listing a bunch of reasons why King George was bad and why they were like declaring independence. And the Declaration of Sentiments was listing a bunch of reasons why men were bad and that women wanted all these things and they demanded this list of things. So universal suffrage, at least for white people, because as I said, um, some feminists were anti-abolitionists, like, and actually played on. That's another thing I didn't mention. Susan B. Anthony, she like would use racism to her advantage to try and say like, oh my God, you're gonna let like black men have more rights than white women, like that's so crazy. Like and would use that as to like argue for women's suffrage. So yeah, they were proponents of like all white suffrage, universal white suffrage for women. But apparently not a lot of people at the event actually agreed for this. It was like 100 out of like 300 people that attended actually signed for the suffrage part. So that was pretty controversial. Um, People like really didn't think women were smart enough to like have the ability to vote. So did I get everything? Oh, they also wanted intellectual and economic equality between men and women, and more opportunities for women to get education. Yeah, Frederick Douglass supported this, and he supported their right to vote thing. But yeah, women didn't gain suffrage until more than 70 years after this convention, so it took a while. These are the Grimke sisters that I was talking about. So their dad was a slave owner, but then they visited Philadelphia and first they became Quakers. Just the textbook just had to mention that. they became Quakers for like 2 seconds, and then they became abolitionist feminists, and they were going around like I think Philadelphia or maybe other places, and they just lectured on like the evils of slavery and also preached about how women should be equal and not stomped on all the time. And yeah, many abolitionist feminists of this time would also say, so this is like Lucy Stone and the other people that I mentioned. They would say that advocating for abolitionism also helped them to learn about their own rights. So because like if they're getting well versed in politics and they're like learning about the oppression that African Americans are facing, then they're kind of like helping them to understand their own oppression and stuff like that. So yeah, people would say that lecturing and demonstrations were like unfeminine, which it kind of goes back to the cult of domesticity thing. And they were like, no, that's not true. And they would actually just use the controversy that their speech, like that they're speaking and lecturing, provoked to just make them more famous. So they used the haters to like make them more famous, basically. And also Sarah and Angelina. I don't. Angelina is like didn't really do much. It sounds like Sarah was kind of the more popular sister. She wrote Letters on the Equality of the Sexes in 1838, and yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but it was a pretty important book, important enough for my textbook to mention it. So, oh my goodness, we are through another section. So this is 5.8 just because there are two parts to this because there I couldn't fit um all of these like things on one slide. But again, you don't really have to read those. Um so South slavery sentiment shifts. Say that 10 times fast. Anyways, uh so what used to be the like argument of or the pro-slavery argument was that slavery was a necessary evil, but the southerners actually were like, no, our ancestors were actually like wrong for saying that because slavery is a positive good. It's good for the slaves, it's good for the economy, it's good for uh us, and it's because like slaves couldn't, they literally like couldn't handle freedom, like they need to be enslaved, like they made all sorts of arguments about this. Also, so the paternalistic thing is like they're very caring and compassionate and lovely to their slaves, which is not what happened. They would whip them to very, I mean, you know that is not true. So, oh, and yeah, they argued that the enslaved, they actually kept them in better living conditions than the factory workers in the North. So they were using that to say like we're better than the North, which they said a lot. They really liked to be better than the North. But yeah, they also extended their paternalism to their neighbors. So, actually, at this point, even though the South is so dependent on slavery and so that's so part of their sectional identity, only a quarter of Southerners actually owned slaves. They all wanted to, but the problem is slaves are pretty expensive, like um, depending on their age and different stuff like that. So not everyone could afford them, but they all wanted to. And what they and this actually didn't create class issues between the yeomen, which are the poor landowning white men, and the slave owners, like the masters, because what the slave owners would do to kind of like reduce class tension is lend that their yeoman neighbors like food, equipment, and all sorts of other stuff because at least they were the poorest Southerners, but at least they weren't black, and that was basically why there wasn't class issues in, well, I mean, there were a little bit, but like not. very many class issues with the Southerners because they were bonding over racism basically and their shared whiteness. Um, even like these really, really poor Southerners were still praised as like the, pioneer men of the nation, like the nation's backbone, because at least, like, again, at least they aren't black. That's basically all they had going for them, but they were like, that is more than enough. I will take it. These are just some very weird pictures once you look at them of paternalistic slave masters. So in this, you have the owner and then his wife and their child, and then this would be probably most likely their actual mother figure. Um, you know, so this is one of their domestic slaves, they would call them, and she would probably be caring for the child a lot. I mean, she would too. But like in this case, where the mother is seemingly deceased or not in the picture, at least literally not in the picture, this would likely be their primary caregiver, because I mean he's not going to be taking care of the kids, of course. And so these two children would grow up with like her raising them. And that would and then these they are included in this picture, this family portrait, because they're just kind of they're trying to prove that they're paternalist, but you know whipping and like sexually assaulting and otherwise assaulting your children or your family, quote unquote, is not a great look. So I don't know about that. King cotton. So, cotton was the leading export. It accounted for 60% of US exports by 1858. Um, and that was all fueled by slavery. You can see the map of the cotton production. But yeah, so even though the external trade was banned, whenever that happened, the transatlantic slave trade was banned, like about 1 million slaves were traded internally. So what would typically happen is slave owners in Kentucky, Virginia, and North Carolina would like have extra slaves that they would just sell down the river, down the Mississippi River, to Arkansas, Alabama, and Mississippi, um, to the black belt of cotton production, which is kind of this zone right here. It's just where cotton was produced after the 1820s is the black belt, after the invention of the cotton gin. I don't know why I'm like so out of breath, but yeah. The Underground Railroad. So this was actually how Frederick Douglass escaped. I mentioned him in passing. He was one of the people that supported the Seneca Falls Convention, uh, and he was an escaped, a runaway slave, and he helped support the abolition movement by telling his personal story about like what um, slavery is like the horrors of slavery. Um, and yeah, he escaped from Maryland in 1838 uh, via the Underground Railroad, which often ran through Ohio, and especially Columbus because of all the railroads and stuff. They're literal railroads. So partially it was actual railroads, but not the whole thing. It wasn't like an underground railroad system, obviously. Anyways, then we have William Lloyd Garrison. He was a white abolitionist that owned a newspaper called The Liberator. And basically, what he wanted was the immediate uncompensated emancipation of slaves. So, uncompensated, like, he didn't believe that you should compensate these people, even though they paid for their slaves. Like, they shouldn't have, I guess, was his argument, which is so he's like, you just I don't care, immediately free them, and you don't get paid to stop because his argument was you don't pay people to stop sinful behavior. You don't like reward people for doing bad things. Yeah, so he also co-founded the AASS Americans Against Slavery Society, which at one point had like a bunch of members. I'm really bad with numbers. I'm sorry. It had a bunch of members, and but it actually there were like more members than there were active abolitionists. So there were just like people that were members but weren't really abolitionists. They were just kind of there, I guess. He called the Constitution a covenant with death because Southerners were arguing that it was pro-slavery because it had like a clause about protecting property. So they were saying like, oh, that means that we can, keep our slave. We can. Well, it was saying we can bring our slaves to the west, and we like still own them. Because we're just bringing our property over. So basically, that was the argument, and he was like, "Oh, well, then covenant with death," and that was that. So he rejected colonization, which we will get to. That one will take a while, though. I think that one's a little farther down the line. So but I promise we will get to it. Abolitionist newspaper jobs were also very dangerous. So he himself, William Lloyd Garrison, was. He was. Hello? Oh, yeah. Um, he was like once led through the streets with like a rope tied around his neck by a mob, and he like ended up barely escaping with his life. Uh, he was a newspaper writer, like I already mentioned. But then you also have Elijah P. Lovejoy. So he was actually the first martyr of the abolitionist movement, which did mean that he was unfortunately killed. Um, he was an anti-slavery editor in Illinois, and he was killed when his printing press was destroyed by a anti-abolitionist mob for the fifth time. So for the first four times, Lovejoy he just resumed publication after um, he like kind of rebuilt his printing press and just resumed publication, and then they destroyed it, and then he went back to publishing, and then the fifth time that that happened he was killed in the destruction. So he was defending his printing press, and then they killed him. His message that he was spreading through his newspaper was the system of Negro slavery is an awful and evil sin. And yeah, he was the first of many people to die for this cause. And then we have David Walker. He is a potentially black abolitionist, but um, I'm not 100% sure, but it seems to imply that he is. Um, so he wrote this appeal. So it's an appeal in four articles, a preamble to the colored citizens of the world, but basically especially, to the United States of America. I can't read all that. Uh-oh, I think my AirPod died. Um, I hope you can still hear me. Okay, so he called for the immediate emancipation of the enslaved and the use of violence is necessary. So similar to William Lloyd Garrison, the full title was An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, and David Walker himself lived from 85 to 30, 1785 to 1830. So, what were the abolitionist parties and their different reasons? I should probably hurry up because I think my other AirPod's gonna die soon, and then I'll suck. The Liberty Party from 1840 to 1847. So they walked so the Free Soil Party could run. Nobody really liked them. They were abolitionists, and just nobody liked abolitionists. Even the North, they didn't really like abolitionists because they didn't love slavery, but because of the some reason that we'll discuss with the Free Soil Party, but they definitely did not like abolitionists. So they insisted on political action and said that moral suasion, which is what they had been using prior to this, they said that wouldn't work anymore, and it hadn't worked, so they were kind of right. Abolitionists was be just because slavery was bad. They were also I don't know exactly what this means if they were like not believing the slave power thesis or they just didn't um, like the slave power. They just didn't think it was correct. I don't know, but they were critical of slave power, and then they dissolved in 48 because nobody liked them and they realized they weren't going to win anything. So then the Free Soil Party was created right after that. They picked up right where they left off, and kind of had a lot of the members from the Liberty Party, but also absorbed some from the um, Whig Party and other people. So, Republicans. Northern Abolitionist Party that argued against slavery, but this is the key part here. They argued against it because of the effects it had on white men's freedom. So, some examples are with the gag rule, which was passed after a bunch of petitions for abolition in the it's sent to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court passed a rule that said they basically just don't have to read any petitions on abolition because they don't want to. That limits their free speech and limits their right to petition their government. Then they have the three-fifths clause. So this was the slave power thesis about why is slavery so bad is because it gives Southerners more power to do more slavery. Because of the three-fifths clause that gives Southerners more political power, even though they have a lower population, technically population, because they didn't consider slaves to be citizens. Um, they had a high electoral college because three-fifths of slaves were considered citizens, but not really considered citizens. They just counted as part of the population. That's a whole another thing that makes sense. And then they also, last but not least, they argued that manifest destiny was also bad because it meant that there was less room and opportunity for Northerners to settle in the West because there were just all these people running in with their slaves and taking up a ton of space. So these people didn't like slavery, but they were definitely not open to the idea of blacks and whites coming together and living in harmony. They were kind of on the idea of colonization of Africa to put basically just put the freed slaves back in Africa like nothing happened, which we'll talk about later. Resistances. So we have Gabriel's Rebellion. This was the first of the four largest conspiracies. I don't know what the third one was because Foner didn't mention it. Then we have, so in this one, I don't know what really happened. It was a rebellion. Denmark Vesey's was planning a rebellion, but he didn't get to carry it out because he got found out first. Somebody snitched. Nat Turner, he did get to carry out his rebellion, killed 55 white people, men, women, children, in the middle of the night, and he was executed. But his last words before his execution were when they're asking you, do you have anything else to say? Do you regret anything? Whatever. He said, was not Christ crucified? Oh my God. The quote was not Christ crucified, which I think is pretty badass of him. And I promised, so here we are. We are at colonization. So the American Colonization Society was founded because they were not really worried about slavery, but they were worried about too many black people running around, like free black people running around when slavery was abolished. When slavery would eventually be abolished. So they were like, oh, what are we gonna do then? We're just gonna, they can't be part of our club. We can't have we can't have that. No. They basically were like, we'll just put them back in Africa where we stole them from in the first place. So yeah, they made a new colony called Liberia in Africa, and a couple. I think my AirPod died. I'm gonna check that real quick.